I do the research. When I invite a guest on, I do the research. And this is one of those shows. The more I dug, the more I wanted, the more questions I have. So I'm going to have to take a deep breath and ask him and just let him roll with some of these things because I have 1,000 questions I want to pounce on. Just coming from my own community last night, we had a little forum. I was thankful they did it. We have 2 people running for sheriff in my county, a wonderful incumbent and a challenger. Yeah, I just said that correctly. A wonderful incumbent and a challenger. And it was good to hear them both and hear their views. And so in this, when I was researching some of the links pertaining to this topic today, I ran across a video from a police chief out of New Orleans, and I hope we have time to play some of that for you because it alarmed me to my socks. Let me just say, alarmed my socks off. How's that? All right, so we're talking about John Lott, Jr. He is, well, let me see. I thought I had his bio, but I'm not sure I do. I'm just going to go to you, John Lott, and I'm just going to ask you to tell us who you are and some of your background.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, but before that, I was senior advisor for research and statistics in the Department of Justice. I've also been chief economist for the U.S. Sentencing Commission, and I've had a number of academic positions over the years. I've had academic positions at Stanford, University of Chicago, the Wharton Business School, Yale, UCLA. So I have a PhD in economics.
Oh my goodness, there are so many different shows I could ask you to join me because economics is always difficult to find good people to talk about some of these things from sometimes a political perspective. So thank you so much. Wonderfully qualified guest. We're honored to have you on our show. The topic we have today before us is crime. Is crime decreasing, increasing? Some of the reports say it's going down. So I'll just quickly ask you, is it going down or up?
Well, they're two. I think it's going up, and I think it's been going up a lot. There are two different measures that we have of crime statistics. We have the FBI Uniform Crime Reports. Those measure the number of crimes that have been reported to police. And then we have something called the National Crime Victimization Survey. And the reason why we do that is that we know most crimes, most violent crimes, and particularly most property crimes, aren't reported to police. So they survey 240,000 people a year to try to get an idea of, how many crimes occur and how many aren't reported to police. And what you find is that there was a huge increase in crime using the FBI reported crime data in 2020 and 2021, though it's started to come down since then. But what seems to be happening is that you have a drop in reported crime, even though total crimes are going up. So if you look at the data from 2021 to 2022, while
All right, did we lose him, Ty? Did we lose the audio? Do you have a phone number for him? I think you have a backup phone number. If you can call the backup phone number, I'm going to go ahead and go with some of this on the report if I can. But if you can call, let me know as soon as you get him back. Oh, do we have him back?
Well, I'm right here. I can hear you. Hello?
Oh, perfect. I don't know what happened. We lost you. I don't know what happened there. I do apologize. So we lost you right after you were talking about the drop in reported crime, but the data, a drop in reported crime, though data going up. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. Well, since we broke there, I'm going to ask you a real quick question. I don't want to take the show in another direction, but when you're talking about FBI crime data, is it possible that some of that increase is with their FBI going after the January 6 people, calling those their activity criminal when there wasn't a report, because most of us don't think what they did was criminal? Is that weighing in on that at all?
No.
Okay. Okay.
But so the issue is why reported crimes over the last couple of years have gone down, even though total crimes have gone up. And there's a simple reason for that, and that is law enforcement in this country has collapsed. If you look at For example, I mean, this is true across all cities, but if you look at cities with more than 1 million people in them, during the 5 years before COVID, 44% of violent crimes resulted in arrest. It started falling in 2020, and by 2022, only 20% of violent crimes in those cities resulted in arrest. That's over a 50% drop in the arrest rate that you have there. And you have had even a larger drop in the arrest rate for property crimes. If you look, for example, at arrests for all violent crimes reported and unreported in those cities, only 8% of violent crimes resulted in arrest, and only 1% of property crimes, total property crimes reported and unreported in those cities, resulted in arrest. And so criminals have very little to worry about. I mean, because just even when you're talking about arrests, that doesn't mean all those arrested are charged, and doesn't mean that
Right.
all those are charged are prosecuted or convicted.
So does this
And
have
so when
something to do does this have something to do
Good.
with what we saw in 2020, 21 with the BLM movement, the defunding of the police force? Is that where this is coming from?
Well, that's part of it. Surely, yeah, that's
Okay.
part of it. You've also had huge numbers of retirements of police. So even in the last year or so, when you've been trying to hire people, they've found it very difficult to hire people. But even when they've, can hire somebody, you're talking about, you've been having these massive retirements for people who have 10, 15, 20 years of experience. Somebody who's on the job for 6 months or a year isn't going to have anywhere near the kind of the knowledge of how to properly be a police officer that somebody who had all those years of experience is going to have. And then another factor is simply the demoralization of police. And obviously that's
Yeah.
related to things like the retirements, but it's also police officers. They arrest people and they find that they're just released, that they don't face,
Right.
the people that they arrest don't even get charged. So some of them wonder, what's the point of even arresting somebody if nothing's going to happen?
Not only do the suspects not get charged, but then oftentimes we're now seeing police are the ones being
Right.
targeted or harassed. So certainly we want them to
Yes.
protect us, but they're vulnerable. We put them out front, but to make split second decisions, and then they're vulnerable when they do. We've seen that over and over. All right. So what do you want our audience to know? I have the video of the police chief out of New Orleans, which to me is alarming. That she wants to create a gun-free zone for the whole city of New Orleans. We can go through part of that, but I also, while we have you here, want to make sure we get every nugget of experience and expertise out of you. So where would you like to go next?
Well, I mean, we can talk about New Orleans. I mean, I agree with you. It's kind of shocking. I mean, in New Orleans, for emergency calls, literally where the criminal's right there, it's 36-minute response time. And
Uh,
so obviously they can't protect people. And yet at the same time that they know that they can't protect people, they don't want to make it so individuals are going to be able to go and protect themselves. So it kind of,
exactly. Yeah. So with that, Ty, to our producer, if you will cue up that video, and I want to start. Let's just start at 3:32 if we can. 3:32. We'll just go to 4:08. But I want her comments there. We're talking about Mardi Gras and the arrest that they made.
There's just so many ancillary woundings like we saw on Sunday.
Sure, absolutely. And so let me take you even to Mardi Gras. We made 111 gun arrests during Mardi Gras. With this bill,
Or people carrying a gun.
carrying a gun. With this bill, we wouldn't even have been able to make the contact to begin with. And that's why this is not thought through. This is not a pro-law enforcement bill. It is not a pro-public safety bill because it removes the officer's ability to even inquire because it's now would be legal for you to carry a permitless gun.
And I'm assuming that you all have talked to some.
Stop right there. So this just offends me so many different ways. She's a police chief in New Orleans, and I don't know what y'all are thinking down there, but I think you need to revisit the idea of a new police chief. Sorry. All right. So John Lott, your thoughts on this? First off, her big thing is that they made 111 arrests in New Orleans for simply carrying a gun. Were these people in the middle of a criminal act, or were they just exercising their Second Amendment right and happened to be in a gun-free zone?
Well, I'm not even sure whether it was a gun-free zone or not. I mean, I know they want to change the law and have an ordinance there for New Orleans to go and ban people being able to go and carry, but there's a state law that allows them to be able to go and do that. So, other than the fact that these individuals were carrying a gun, it's not obvious to me what the offense was that they were engaged in, that they were engaged in any type of criminal activity or what have you. It could simply be that, you know, they didn't like people carrying guns. So we'll have to see exactly what's involved there. But look,
Right?
she doesn't like the constitutional carry law that is in effect in Louisiana.
Louisiana.
And but you know, so there are benefits to having that type of provision. They're basically twofold. One is, let's say a woman's being stalked or threatened. She may not have 90 days to go and wait while they go through the approval process to go and let her get a permit to be able to go and carry. She, you know, even a few days may make a difference between whether she's able to go and protect herself or not. The other thing is just the cost. So, like, you have $100 or so the cost of getting a concealed carry permit in the state there. If my research convinces me of anything, that the people who benefit the most from being able to go and protect themselves are the people who are the most likely victims of violent crime. And that overwhelmingly tends to be poor blacks who live in high crime urban areas. You know, it'd be great if the police were there to protect you all the time, but obviously in a situation like we've just been describing in New Orleans, they're not doing a very good job of that. Not able to do it. I'm not going to necessarily blame the police because obviously they've had a huge cut in the number of police officers that are there. You know, but the question is, what should people do when they're having to confront a criminal by themselves? And simply going and telling people to behave passively isn't very good advice.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely not. And so I think it might surprise a lot of people when you say those who may most benefit are those in the inner city, the black inner cities. They may be able to protect themselves. And we all know, we understand the gang violence. We understand in inner city a lot of violence that occurs. But I don't think most people are understanding that those folks who might want to use a gun lawfully only to protect themselves deserve that right and could prohibit or prevent some of these dangerous situations. As well, I think you mentioned the elderly, which might surprise some folks, but be a great idea. But her comment that they just, couldn't take 111 guns like they already did because they wouldn't even be able to make contact with these people and ask if they were carrying a weapon. Imagine, that's their Second Amendment rights, folks. Think that through. And as we've already established, 36 minutes to respond. I think that was New Orleans, 36 minutes. So, John, to that point, how many crimes could be prevented by these people having a weapon, being able to draw it, or being able to actually shoot down someone who is causing harm to others?
Right.
We talk about, some people say that police only arrive after the crime, which is often true. We don't know how often police may prevent a crime if we had more police in more locations. But this just, all right, I'm flummoxed by her wanting to take the right of her citizens away to protect themselves when she knows the city is not doing a very good job with their 36-minute response time. That
For
is
emergency calls, the average response time for 911 calls in general is 3 hours. But look, look, anybody who's read my academic research knows that I think police are the single most important factor for reducing crime. But look, as you say, police understand themselves that they virtually always arrive on the crime scene after the crimes occurred. And that raises questions, as we were just talking about, what people should do when they're having to confront a criminal by themselves. And the reason why women and the elderly benefit disproportionately more from having a gun for protection is that, you know, you're talking about usually young males who go and do the violent crime. And when a man is attacking a woman, there's a lot larger strength difference that exists there than when a man is attacking another man. And the presence of a gun represents a much bigger relative change for a woman or an elderly person's ability to go and protect themselves than when you're dealing with for a man.
So one, I just want to thank you, one, for sharing with us, but you, in one of your reports, you say academic criminologists and economists who have published peer-reviewed studies and research on guns also agree. The survey shows that they have the same top 4 preferred policies for stopping murders and mass public shootings. One included letting people carry concealed handguns and abolishing gun-free zones. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on those two, or what were 3 and 4. Do you know? Do you remember?
Well, basically, they're all dealing with the other ones are dealing with getting rid of different types of gun-free zones. But look, when I was chief economist for the U.S. Sentencing Commission, I must have read more than 1,000 trial transcripts. And what you see time after time after time is that criminals aren't stupid, or at least that stupid. They basically try to go and take easy victims. You know, you'll have testimony from one robber turning against another robber in court, and they'll ask him, why did you pick the particular victim that you did? And they'll say, well, we were talking about robbing the drug dealer down the street, but he has lots of guns and it'd be pretty crazy to go after him. Or we were thinking about robbing a cab driver, but cab drivers often are carrying guns. And so they'll say, we saw this small woman walking across a parking lot by herself, and she looked like an easy target. And so who did they go after? They went after the person who was the easy target there. And when you go and you have these types of gun-free zones, basically what happens is that and you see this in mass public shootings. Anybody who's read the diaries or manifestos for these killers know that very frequently they'll explicitly state why they picked the target that they did in their diaries and manifestos. And they'll say they want to go to a place where they know their victims aren't able to go and defend themselves, because that will make them relatively easier targets. You take something like the Covenant school shooter last year. That murderer in the diary, even though the Biden administration has yet to release the diary, explicitly talked about picking a target where they knew the victims couldn't defend themselves. In fact, their first choice had actually been the Greenfield Mall there in Nashville. But when they checked it out, they realized that there was armed security there. So they went after the school because they didn't think anybody was going to be able to stop them.
All right. So, John, one, to our viewers out there, it's an election year. Many of them have primaries coming up in June. As I said, there's a primary for sheriff in my own county. What can we be doing as Americans to protect ourselves, defend ourselves, and to help change policy?
Well, I mean, law enforcement is a local issue. The number of police that you're going to have, the policing policies that you're going to have are determined locally. The district attorneys that you have are elected locally. They determine who they're going to prosecute. And the judges who sentence the people there, they're also locally elected, usually across the country. So, what you're going to be able to do to make people safer depends upon who fills those local positions. The state has very limited roles in terms of stopping criminals. It's much more the local government.
The state does have a limited role in stopping the crime, but as we've discussed, gun-free zones usually and often come from the state, and so your state legislators can certainly do something to help protect your state. In Iowa, we just reaffirmed and put in a Second Amendment to our own state constitution, didn't have one before. Our legislatures have been good to expand constitutional carry and permitless carry. There's still some things we can do to even improve that. Your Second Amendment should be unfettered. It should not be infringed upon at all. And so we can work in that area. And so the police chief, and I may go back and play this, I don't want to do it while you're here and use your time up, John, but her attitude in the very beginning of wanting gun-free zones is a fright to me. She does not understand the Second Amendment, the liberty of the Constitution. The location of your city in a crime is one thing, but the Constitution is all over every location, and it should be upheld in any city. I don't care what you're dealing with as far as crime. The Constitution stands. John, anything you want to say to our viewers before you have to go? And again, I just want to thank you so much for the expertise that you're able to share with us. Your resume is impressive, and I do hope that you'll come back another time. But tell our viewers anything you want them to be thinking about or ways that they can be making a difference.
I appreciate you having me on. I do have to run, but people can find more about all these issues that we're talking about at our website at crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org. But I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
John Lott is my guest today. Crimeresearch.org is the website. I highly recommend that you do go there, and I am so thankful for his time.